Hey everyone! In this video, I'll take a look at these Learn to Solder kits from Rocket Dept. These are some really neat looking soldering kits that should be both easy to put together as well as fun to play with once they're complete. The kits are all made here in the US and are available at learntosolderkit.com or from Amazon. I've left links in the description if you'd like to pick some up for yourself. Each one comes with everything you need to get started, with the exception of the solder and the soldering iron. You'll probably also want a pair of snips like these to shorten any of the long leads at the end. But anyway, let's get started. The first kit is named Blink, and it contains the PCB itself, which feels like a pretty good quality. It's a nice amethyst purple color, and the edges are really smooth. And there's some nice big solder pads on this, so it should be really easy to solder to. And this card has a parts list, as well as a link to the instructions. So if we go over the parts list, we got our PCB, our battery, our red, green, and blue LEDs, our 3 resistors, we've got our 3 tactile buttons, our little push buttons, and then our battery holder. So if you go to that link, you can find instructions for all of the kits in PDF format. This is what the Blink kit instructions look like. They're really well put together. A lot of nice illustrations in there. A lot of even just soldering tips as well. So they recommend that we start with the resistors. So let's get all of these little bits out of the way. So first you bend the legs of the resistor. And then you slide it into this space. And resistors, of course, are bidirectional, so it doesn't matter which direction they go. Although I do like to keep the color bands all in the same orientation, just for aesthetic reasons. So once those are in place, I'll just grab my soldering iron. And there you go, first resistor. Then you just repeat that step for the next 2 resistors. Okay, resistors are complete. So the next step is to go ahead and snip off those legs from the resistors. I'm not going to snip mine super close because you don't want to snip the solder joint itself, and I can clean it up later. For now, I'll just get them out of the way so it's easier to solder the rest. There we go. And do be careful with these little pointy bits because they can be kind of sharp. With the resistors out of the way, they recommend doing the battery holder next. So for that, you'll just want to position the battery holder into those little holes. Now we've got our battery holder. So next they recommend the switches. Let's get those out. I had to maneuver it a little bit to get them all in there, but they should fit flush like that. Then you just repeat that for the next 2 buttons. And next it's time for the LEDs. So for these they're saying that the positive leads, which are the long ones, are going to go into the square holes, while the short ones go into the circular holes. So first we'll do the red LED. And for these, I do find it's a little bit easier if you kind of bend the leads to hold it in place better. Even better is if you get putty. They make putty that'll hold all your components in place, which is solder resistant. It's a really good way to do it. Another option is to use helping hands, like little alligator clips that kind of hold things in place as well. I'm doing this kind of the hard way to prove a point that even without any of those accessories and sort of a very hot, cheap soldering iron, it's still possible to put these together correctly. Now I put a little bit too much solder on this one. I'm just going to split up the lead. Now I've got the red LED, and I repeat the same process for the green one. And now the green one's on. Finally, the blue one. And here it is, all complete. The only thing left to do now is to put the battery in. And now if you press the buttons, the LEDs light up. Very cool. Yeah, this would make a great little toy for kids to play with, but it would also look great sitting out on your desk or something, just as a little gadget. And that's the blink. This next one is the Hue kit. So this one contains the PCB, which, similar to the blink, is a nice purple amethyst color. Nice smooth edges. Even on the parts where it was clipped out from a larger board, on a lot of PCBs there will be this rough, like kind of sharp edge on those points. But on this one it's nice and smooth. So you've got the PCB, the battery, a very large red, green, blue LED, 3 resistors, again all the same value, so you don't have to worry about which one goes where. 3 potentiometers, these little dials, a little on-off switch, very satisfying click to it, and then the battery holder. Similar to the last one, if you go to this URL, you can find instructions in the form of a PDF, and here's what they look like. Much like the blink, they have you start with the resistors. Let's get everything out of the way and take these off of their tape. So these are a little bit different. You see they're all oriented differently here. Again, resistors are bidirectional. It doesn't matter which way they go. I'm just going to go ahead and bend all of the leads. And we'll start with R1. Now, it would probably be easier if you trimmed the leads in between each one. I'm just kind of putting this all together pretty quickly. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can get in there to solder, you're fine. These kits seem pretty forgiving. The soldering pads are all really large. Circuits are all simple. It's pretty easy to put together. I am going to go ahead and snip these off right now, though. At least trim them down a bit so they're out of the way. Do be careful when you're snipping off leads like this, because sometimes on the thicker ones, not so much on the resistors, but some of the thick leads, when you snip them, they just go flying. So next they recommend the potentiometers, and it looks like these are going to go facing downward so that the bottom is accessible as a little dial. These might be a little bit awkward to solder. You may want to use alligator clips or putty on this. I'm actually just going to use the other potentiometer to kind of hold the board in place so I get a good angle and I can put pressure without it being all lopsided. And once you get that first one in, the rest of them are really easy, because the first one just holds it all in place for you. Cool. Alright, you just do it for all of them. Awesome. See, I got the green one a little bit lopsided. I should be able to clean that up, probably just by heating these. Pushing the leads down to realign it. Yeah, that's much better. So the next step they recommend is the battery holder. Obviously you want the battery to slide in from the outside. And the next step is the on-off switch. And it doesn't matter how you put this on because it's always going to complete the circuit in the right way. This one seems like it might be a little bit tricky to get oriented. This is where having some of that putty would really help. Again, once I get one of these soldered in place, it'll all hold in place nicely. It's really just this first one that matters. That looks pretty good. Alright. Looks like we got everything except for the LED. So if you look at the instructions, they tell you how to orient this. Basically, the longest pin is going to go into that one with the marking above it. So you see that little line. That's going to be the longest pin. So you just press that down real nice. And just like the other LEDs, I'm going to bend these two outer ones. Kind of spread these so they're easier to solder. Oh, it's got a pretty good hold, so I don't have to worry about it wiggling around too much. So these, they even mention in the instructions that this is the trickiest part of the kit, just because the LEDs have such tightly packed leads. So you really got to be careful when you get in there, not to bridge any connections or anything like that. But that wasn't too bad. With LED leads like this, I like to go in and kind of pull up any excess solder. And then just like the rest, we'll go in with these snips. Now these are thick and they will go flying. So be very careful. You might want to wear some eye protection for this part. And after I snip off leads like that, I like to go back over and sort of remelt the solder. It just kind of rounds it off after you've snipped it. Just be careful not to melt too much or, your components will fall right out. But if you just heat it up one at a time, kind of let it cool in between, you can just round off the snipped ends some. Alright, now it's all complete. Just take this battery here and put it in. Turn it on. Ooh. So with them all the way to the left like this, we've got a white LED. So let's see what happens. Ooh, so then if I turn this, it's decreasing the red channel in it. And this one's decreasing the green channel. So you see, this way you can get it just the right shade that you want. Like maybe turn the red and blue all the way down and you get green. And then you can gradually add your blue back to get kind of a teal color. The camera doesn't quite show it very well, but... Or maybe turn the green all the way off, you get this solid blue. And you can gradually add the red back. That is really neat. So this one also would make a good toy, as well as, a nice little desk decoration. Or with Halloween coming up, you could toss this thing in a pumpkin, and then you'll be able to customize exactly what color you want it to be. So yeah, that's the Hue kit. Next we have the Jitterbug kit. So this one contains the Jitterbug PCB, which is adorably shaped like a little insect. On the back, they have bug facts. So this one says, fact number 7 out of 20. While insects dominate the Earth, they are virtually non-existent in the oceans that cover 70% of the planet. I guess if you want to read the other bug facts, you're going to have to get all 20 of them. That's cute. And then we've got the battery, obviously. Let's go ahead and open up the parts bag. So here we've got 2 red LEDs, kind of stubby LEDs. I think these are for the eyes. We've got 1 vibration motor. So this is going to be a little haptic motor that when it's powered on, it's going to basically shake and vibrate. And we've got a switch, another satisfying clicky switch. And we've got some wire for the legs, and then a battery holder. So, similar to the other kits, you're going to go to learn2solderkit.com, find the Jitterbug instructions. This is another PDF. Here's what they look like. So again, you've got those really nice illustrations, really detailed instructions for putting these kits together. So in this one, they're saying to start with the vibration motor. Normally I would trim it up a little bit more, but I'm going to try to do this without any special tools like wire strippers. Yeah, this is definitely the most difficult part that they've included in any of these kits. This one is a little bit more advanced. Looks like I got it though. So you can do it without any wire strippers. It looks like the wire survived just fine too. Let's see if I can do the same with the red one. Well, that seemed to work. These seem very delicate though, so be extremely careful with this part. So then you're going to want to take this little pad off of the back to reveal a sticky surface, and you're going to put that over their logo right there. So yeah, that's not too bad. Kind of tuck these over just to get them out of the way. Cool. Next, they recommend adding the battery holder. So this is going to go over the abdomen part here. And you're going to want to slide the battery in at the bottom, so make sure you put it on the correct orientation. And just like the others, you really just need to make sure it's all lined up when you're soldering in the first pin. Because once you've got that lined up, the others, it'll just hold in place. Okay, so after the battery holder, they recommend adding the LEDs. And they've used the common convention to have positive, which remember for LEDs, positive is the longer wire and negative is the short one. And they've always used positive for the square and negative for the circle. If you look really closely, see if I can get the camera. Yeah, you see you have one of the pads is a circle and one of the pads is a square. Just put positive in the square. And just like the other LEDs, I tend to bend these over a little bit to hold them in place. That way they don't move around a bunch while you're soldering. Now this one, soldering it on a surface like this, because the LED is going to kind of give it a pivot, it would be a lot easier if you use a pair of alligator clips like the helping hands or putty. And I'll go ahead and clip these. Cool. So we do the same. Just put the long one in the square hole, short one in the circle, bend them over a bit. Again, for some of these, after I clip them, I like to go in and kind of round off the solder. Just makes it feel nicer. And the next step is going to be your on-off switch, which again, it doesn't matter what orientation it is, it's just kind of how switches work. It'll work either way. Snip these. Alright, now we're almost complete. The next step seems kind of tricky. We need to cut this wire into thirds. I don't think you need to be precise here. If you can't get it in perfect thirds, you can trim them all so that they're equal at the end. In fact, that's probably what I'll do. So I'm just going to take them all lined up and snip those ends off just so I don't have the bent part. And then I'll just do the same over here, keeping them lined up. So now I have 3 equal pieces. And The instructions basically have you place them into here. And they mention that it's going to take a little bit of wiggling to get them into place. Try not to damage your battery holder. I'm going to go ahead and put all of them in at once. So yeah, you can see this kit is definitely a little bit more challenging than the other two. It's still pretty easy. You just have to be more careful. There's some delicate parts like those wires on the motor, and it's a little bit tricky to get these into place for the legs. It's no big deal though. I think if you don't get these just right, it's not really going to matter. It's already starting to look much more bug-like. So now we just need to solder these. I'm going to go ahead and kind of bend them a bit to help them hold. Yeah, that looks neat. And there you go. Got all the legs soldered on. So now you just want to bend your legs until it looks the way that you want it to look. I think you can kind of be creative with this part. You just want to have every leg kind of touching the ground. As long as it sort of balances, I think it'll be fine. Alright, now we should just be able to put the battery in and turn it on. That is very cool. And for the Firefly Jar kit, unfortunately my camera ran out of space in the middle of recording it, so I lost the footage of soldering it together. But the circuit is really simple. You've got this resistor here, and then the battery holder, and then this tilt sensor, and a big LED that flickers. You put one piece of Velcro on the bottom of the circuit itself, and then another piece of Velcro on the inside of this lid. That way you can stick them together like this, but it's still easy to remove later on. And with the tilt sensor, it'll stay off while the jar is upside down, so then you can flip it over to turn it on. Unfortunately, my tilt sensor is really touchy, and it doesn't want to stay on while it's right side up. Maybe I just didn't get the angle right, or maybe my sensor is defective, I'm not sure. But as a temporary solution, I've bridged the two connections for the sensor with a piece of wire. This way it'll always be on as long as the battery is in, and I can turn it on and off by inserting and removing the battery. Later on, if I find a different sensor, I'll desolder this and replace it, but this works for now. So you see with the flicker, it gives it this nice firefly effect. You could probably put some tissue paper or something in there too to diffuse it a little bit and have sort of like a candle in a jar effect. And there you go. 4 fun and easy soldering kits from the folks at Rocket Dept. They sell all of these kits individually, but they also sell educator packs that range from 8 to 32 count, which would be a much better deal if you're buying them for an entire classroom or a workshop or something. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about these kits, and until next time, happy soldering!